Badfinger wrote one of pop's classic songs, Without You, recorded by over 200 artists. But within a few years, both the co-writers of that song had killed themselves.
Two people in one band, one person is sort of sad, but like two people, you think something is wrong.
Badfinger started out as the Ivies, a band from South Wales, who became the first group to be signed to the Beatles' Apple label. Changing their name to Badfinger, they had 3 top 10 hits in the UK and huge success in America, where they were hailed as the natural successors to the Beatles. The 1960s Swansea was a thriving hotbed of young bands. Ace guitarist Deke Leonard of the Man Band is one of Swansea's premier musicians and a long-time friend of the Ivies.
There were bands in every other house. In the street you lived, there were bands everywhere, and there weren't enough gigs to go around, so everybody was playing 6-7 nights a week.
Drummer Terry Williams played with many of the Swansea bands before graduating to Dire Straits.
There were the Meteorites, Fireflies, Corncrackers, Jets, Comancheros, and we just had all stupid names.
And it was a great scene.
Dominating the Swansea skyline is the rough and tough estate of Townhill. It was in his mum's council house that a 14-year-old Pete Ham made his first faltering notes in his band The Panthers. He soon teamed up with pal and guitarist Di Jenkins.
We got not a booking, but a gig as such, in a mental home in Swansea, which we didn't mind because it had a stage, it had lighting, and we'd done that, and we went down all right. We progressed then we had our first booking in a pub.
Pete's band went through many changes, but settled down to include bassist Ron Griffiths and a 15-year-old drummer, Mike Gibbons.
And Ron Griffith came to my house, and I'm like, whoa, what's that? You know what I mean? And he asked me if I wanted to do an audition to join the band. I went, oh, he's a mod, because he was a mod, the mod haircut, you know, and the mod club, and I'm a rocker. Anyway, they gave me the job, and I was like, I'll give it a shot, you know, see how it works out. And they proceeded to cut my hair the very next day to look like them.
Even in these early days, Pete Ham was learning to write his own songs. 1966, and the Ivies were now top of the pile in Swansea, gigging 4 times a week and often twice on Saturdays. At the Regal Ballroom, Ammanford, they shared the billing with top 10 group The Mojos and were approached by their 50-year-old roadie, Bill Collins.
What made them so special wasn't the stage act. They didn't have one. It was the way their voices blended. But more than that, the kind of material they chose. Real rhythm and blues type stuff.
Within months, Bill was back in Swansea, offering them a job backing singer David Garrick, who had a hit with Mick Jagger's Lady Jane.
Bill came down and arranged a meeting with all the families, and he didn't promise. I think his words were, all I'm going to promise is blood, sweat and tears, or worse to that effect. I'm not going to promise anything, but they're good enough to make it in this business. We'll get work, and we'll take it from there, but it needs your blessing for the lads to leave home.
For the first time, they were let loose in swinging 60s London. the Ivies were quickly becoming too much competition for David Garrick.
We're doing a gig in Ireland, and he's singing Mrs. Appleby, right? And the girls are screaming, screaming, screaming. And then I went, hang on a minute. They're over this side, they're screaming at Di Jenkins. There's a big crowd of girls in front of the stage, screaming at Di and the Ivies, you know? And I think that's why we got fired.
Because you heard that I was bad. Sausage and egg in the transport cab. Money is getting so low.
With no David Garrick or regular gigs, money was tight. Bill had set them up in a rented house in Golders Green, already full of musicians.
We were on a retainer of about £5 each a week, which I know is £5 was more than 30, 40 years ago. But it was still pretty tight because we were all smokers, young men, we drank, and there was a toss-up with 10 cigarettes or extra cornflakes.
This is how much money we had. We had an apple tree in the backyard, thank God, which we didn't plant, and it was a mature one. So for breakfast, we'd have apple stew, you know, stewed apples. For dinner, we'd have, like, I don't know, apple pie. And for supper, we'd have a surprise, apple surprise, which was like no apples left.
The house in Golders Green had a specially built mini studio, and Bill encouraged them to write their own songs.
No matter what you are, I will always be with you.
Pete Ham's girlfriend at the time was Beverly Ellis.
He spent every minute that he could in the studio. The others used to go in as well, but nobody went in as frequently as Pete. They would come back from a gig 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and on the way back he would have had an idea for a song. He would go straight into the studio, work through till 8, 9 o'clock.
Bill Collins, their roadie-cum-manager, kept them hard at it in the studio and kept the girls at arm's length.
I mean, it must have been awful for Bill because we were sneaking girls in and out the house because he hated women, you know. They would ruin his band, you know what I'm saying? And Di, being the immaculate babe magnet, he was like somewhere else. What's he doing? He's got women everywhere, you know what I mean? They're coming out of his pockets, you know.
Di was great on stage, but loved pulling the birds, which wasn't leaving him much time for work in the studio.
And Di was one of my best friends, obviously, you know what I mean? We were close. And we all got drunk that night because we knew he was going to get the axe, you know.
Bill was responsible for the group's affairs and encouraged them to look for a replacement in his hometown, Liverpool. They came up with Tommy Evans. Marion Evans, Tommy's future wife, met him about this time.
Tommy was more extrovert, and then he could be introvert. He could be really quiet. He locks himself up in a room. He didn't want to talk to anybody, and then he comes out and he will be really wild again. No, I mean, Tommy was mad sometimes. He was a wild one. And working with Pete, sometimes it stabilized him. They were very close together. And as a songwriter team, they really matched each other.
On the breadline, with only the occasional gig, they struck lucky. Mal Evans, an old Liverpool mate of Bill, was impressed by the band's demo tapes and took them to Apple Records, where he worked. The Ivies were the first group to be signed to the Beatles' Apple label.
I can remember the boys running around, literally running around the house, saying, Apple, Apple. You know, they just couldn't believe it. This was a dream for any band at that time, that the Beatles were interested.
2 years after leaving Swansea, the Ivies' first single was released, a Tommy Evans song, Maybe Tomorrow. It was a jukebox hit, but it didn't do anything in the UK charts.
When it failed to make it, we sort of got really negative for about, I don't know, it must have been 9 months or a year. We didn't have any confidence in our own material or anything. I mean, we didn't have any real success as the Ivies.
The name had to go. And John Lennon, everybody put their penny in to get a name. He wanted to call us the pronounced pricks, P-R-I-X. That's what he meant.
The Glass Onion was another one of his.
The Cagneys, they wanted to call us the Cagneys because we were little punks.
The Beatles had a minor, or was it a B-side or a demo or something, which was called Badfinger Boogie, and that's where that came from. Not one of my favourite names.
So we said, I'm tired of looking for a name. Let's use that. It doesn't matter.
With a new name for the band, Apple were looking for a new single. Paul McCartney had written a song for the film The Magic Christian, starring Ringo Starr and Peter Sellers, and asked Badfinger to record it.
He came round to the house. This is the first time we actually met him, so you can imagine what we were like on tenterhooks. You know, living legends coming round to chat to us.
But he wanted us to do it. He wanted us to break out of the small time into the big time, and that was the vehicle that did it.
Ron played on that recording, but it was to be for the last time.
I was married and I had a young son, Jason, and we were squeezed together in this house. We didn't have enough money for me to go and live elsewhere.
He didn't get kicked out, he got pressured out, which was very unfair. And I blame Tommy for that one, because Ron he wasn't doing nothing wrong, musically, all right? And so it just fizzled out, you know what I'm saying? He didn't fit in anymore because we were all partying and he wasn't,
I can give it, but you better hurry, 'cause it may not last.
Ron was quickly airbrushed out of the group. His picture wasn't even on the album or single.
Although I was on it, I had the pleasure of watching it go up the charts, and I was riding to work in hail, wind and snow on a push bike.
You better hurry, 'cause it's going bad.
When Badfinger appeared on Top of the Pops, a new man, Joey Molland from Liverpool, had taken Ron's place.
Make your mind up fast.
Now we got Pete, myself from Wales, and we got Joey, and we got Tommy from Liverpool. So now instead of being the Ivies, it's us and them.
Pete and Tommy wrote 2 more songs for the film The Magic Christian. Come and Get It was a hit in the UK and climbing the charts in the US, so Bill Collins went looking to break the band into America and met corporate showbiz manager Stan Polly, who was impressed by the connection to the Beatles label and saw a chance to make some big money.
I said to him, well, what's the deal? What's the deal we've got with you? He said, I'm asking for a deal. Let's get your tour together and see how they go on, and we'll talk about that in due course.
I don't remember it being a lavish tour, and we go on a little combo and we kick some ass, It was good.
It was easy for Polly to persuade Bill to let him run Badfinger's business affairs.
I'm not legal-minded. I'm not a businessman. I had to do it on feel and trust to satisfy myself. You might say that was a poor show for the group I was looking after. But they had a chance to take it to lawyers. I was told, it was all discussed.
Pete firmly believed that whatever Bill did was for their benefit. He also had a tremendous feeling of loyalty to him because, after all, Bill did recognise the talent. And if it hadn't been for him, he felt they probably would never have come to London.
No matter what you are, I will always be with you. Doesn't matter what you do, girl, with you. No matter
The band took off in America.
We did 3 months on the road, and then usually a couple of months off in the studio, and then 3 months back on the road. We did about 2 of them a year, 6 months of the year gigging.
Suitcase, suitcase, follow me around. Bootlace, bootlace, turn it down. Money, fun, yeah, golden crown. It's all inside the game we've been playing so long. Looking out from my lonely room, day after day.
Badfinger toured in the States almost continually for 15 months, where their albums No Dice and Straight Up became big hits. By 1972, they were becoming huge. But their biggest success of all was to come with a song written back in 1969, tucked away on an album and not even released as a single.
He said one evening, well, tonight, I promise you, I'm not going in the studio, we're going out. Fine, so I got ready, and we were just about to go out the door, and Tom put his head around the door and said, can you come in the studio? I've got an idea. I've got this thing, going round in my head. And I said to Pete, just go in. And he said, but that's not fair, I've said that we'll go out this evening. I said, no, it's okay. I don't mind. Look, I'm smiling. I don't mind. And he said, your mouth is smiling, but your eyes are sad.
Well, I can't forget this evening and your face when you were leaving, but I guess that's just the way the party goes. You always smile, but in your eyes the sorrow shows. Yes, it shows.
Because Tommy had a crappy song, but with this, I can live, and that was the good part. So they just snipped it together, and it worked.
I can't live if living is without you. I can't live. I can't give anymore.
And they were in Olympic Studios doing a record, and Nilsson was in the other studio. Nilsson saw them and he said, come with me. So they went into the Nilsson studio, and he said, listen to this, see what you think of this. And he played them the final mix of Without You. And they didn't know he'd recorded it, they didn't know anything. The full thing hit them. And Peter said it was brilliant. We were, it was absolutely gorgeous.
We thought we were getting rich, Well, we got number 1 with Nielsen. We got number 2 with us. We're doing good, And then we thought, okay, so let's be frugal. So what we did, we said to our management, just give us a monthly wage so that we can live on nicely, Because we all lived in Surrey and everything, and Golders Green was nice, And then anything else, just put that in the pot, what I'm saying? Put that away in the pot, so we accumulate. So we figured everything's taken care of. And like I said before, oops.
Oh, I'm sorry, but it's time to move away.
The peace, love, and generation was coming to an end. With Apple squandering money, American Alan Klein had been brought in to sort it out. A massive cost-cutting regime was introduced, which meant the end of Apple as Badfinger knew it.
You know the gift you have will all...
The walls were knocking at the door in the shape of a big American label, Warner Brothers.
What do we do? Because the Beatles were our saviors, all right? I mean, they're idols. They've done nothing but help us. So we're not going to shit on the Beatles, are we? But Warner Brothers dangled a carrot, which is the Ass album, if you notice. They offered us a $3 million deal through Stanley Polly, remember? So eventually we signed.
George rang me up one night. He said, Bill, what bloody happening? leaving it. I said, you can blame that manager that you put in to look after your affairs.
Oh, I'm sorry, but it's time to make a step.
He was very distressed at leaving Apple. He really did feel that something very special was lost.
To walk alone. We were the children.
Badfinger was still living on a wage, but they now had wives, girlfriends, even children, and there was a growing concern about where the money was.
You're the apple of my heart.
I was told when I was 22 years old by an accountant that I can fart on the next record, we're millionaires. And I remember phoning my dad going, everything's cool, boom, right? That was a pipe dream right there. And I'm told by professional pinstripes that's the case. And they were blowing smoke on my butt, you know? You know, so, you know, the rest of that is like, you know, a nightmare. Then it starts going downhill, don't it?
Warner's paid a huge advance to their American management.
Never believe this, but I broke the string.
We used to beg for our money, you know? If you wanted extra money, you know what I'm saying? You have to phone New York if you can get, you know, if you can get through and all that.
Tommy said, why shall I write songs? I don't get any money out of it anymore. He was very depressed at that stage, with management disappointed.
Apple and Warner's both released albums at the same time, but they didn't sell. Stan Polly pushed them back into the studio to record another album, Wish You Were Here. The tensions were becoming unbearable.
And that was when Tommy said, something's really wrong here, and we're not going to get any money. This is bullshit, right? That's when Tommy Evans went over the top, all right? And that's why he only had one song on the album. He wasn't thinking music, he was thinking business, you know?
Gotta get out of here.
After recording the album and with another tour lined up, emotions in the group were high, and after a blazing row, Pete Ham quit.
Gotta be others near.
He was quickly replaced by keyboardist Bob Jackson.
But what happened was, about 4 or 5 rehearsals in, Pete rolled up to one of these rehearsals. I didn't know he was being invited along, but there he was, and he listened to it, said some very nice things about it all, and basically sort of said, look, I'd love to come back. So that's what happened. He came back and did the tour with us. So I ended up being in the band with the guy I'd replaced, which was kind of weird.
The reunion was short-lived. At the end of the tour, guitarist Joey Molland quit. The band were pushed back into the studio to record yet another album, with only 2 weeks to prepare.
In fact, Peter broke a guitar over the piano, smashed a Martin guitar up, a $2,000 guitar, smashed it out of frustration. And they rushed us. I think we did it in a couple of weeks. You know, write it, perform it, record it, mix it.
Badfinger weren't alone in wanting to know where their money had gone. Their publishers, Warner Music, were in dispute with the American management. Legal wrangles ensued, and the Wish You Were Here album was pulled from the shelves. The group were busted. The dream had become a nightmare.
They pulled the rug from under us, is what they did, okay?
There was nothing at all, and we sat round for quite a while. Nothing. We couldn't get anything organised. Who was going to organise it? We didn't have a manager. Well, we had 2 managers, but nothing was happening. No money was coming in. No direction was given. And this is, of course, when Pete really started to go downhill, you know.
Take your seat by the ringside. Watch them beating for your blood.
Pete was already living with his girlfriend, Anne. She was pregnant. He had a mortgage, all right, which he's never had before. This was his very first house, okay? And he was renovating it, and da-da-da-da. All of a sudden, we couldn't find any money. I mean, he couldn't phone Stan Polly or the office or the he couldn't get in touch with his secretary. The guy that answers the phone. I mean, nothing. And his bank balance was in the red, and he couldn't get any joy, you know? And he was freaking out.
In 1975, at the age of 27, Pete Ham hanged himself in his London home.
Oh, Jesus. What have I done? I shouldn't have started Badfinger in the first case.
Badfinger struggled along for a few more years, but was never the same after the death of its founding member and driving force, Peter Ham. His close friend and co-writer Tommy Evans struggled to get over the suicide.
Well, he kept saying my other half is gone. You know, the songwriting half was gone. He didn't have anybody else there to work with. He tried it in America, that didn't work out, so everything was negative from then on. He would lie in bed for days, doesn't get up, and I said, Tommy, get up. You got a nice son, beautiful home. There's no reason to look back. Carry on. But his mind was black.
In November 1983, Tommy Evans hanged himself, just like his friend had done 8 years earlier.
I think they were making grand but futile gestures, which, given the people that they were dealing with, people like that don't care about grand gestures, you know. So the golden goose is dead. There'll be another one along in a minute. We can rip him off.